All right, so these are going to be some notes on the Dark Ages government. We're talking in themes here, following along with the themes that we started talking about in the ancient civilizations of when we were looking at the themes and we talked about government. Government's job is to create laws, to enforce laws, and also to protect the people. Dark Ages is the time that we refer to after the fall of Rome, and also what we call the Middle Ages as well. So we're going to call them Dark Ages or Middle Ages, and we'll talk more about why we call them particularly the Dark Ages in just a moment. So this is what we're going to talk about in this set of notes. Okay, so at this time, a little bit of recap. After the fall of Rome, what did Europe really look like? Essentially, it was a bunch of gangs, right? And all of these different tribes, all of these different groups were made up of a bunch of different tribes. And the Romans in particular just called them all barbarians, but we know they were made up of different tribes like the Goths and the Visigoths and the Franks and the Vandals. And there were lots of many different tribes, okay, and essentially they were very, very violent, and they were all struggling and looking for power, and it was lots and lots of little different kingdoms, okay. There was no control, there was no idea of this central idea and control of government. It was as far away from what the Roman Empire had looked like as possible, okay. And this became a very, very dangerous time to travel, to trade, to try and set up what had existed as what they had known inside of Rome. So people are looking for this kind of structure, and so they want help, they want this, but they can't seem to find it. So we now are looking for it, especially if you're a peasant. I mean, look at this poor lady here. She's kind of getting trampled on, right? So they start looking for, where can we get this? And the answer becomes the type of government they find, and that is this system that historians call feudalism, okay? And feudalism really is kind of a three-pronged system, okay? It becomes their government structure, okay? It also then, for them, becomes their military, all right, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And it also becomes, oops, got cut off here at the bottom, but it says their economic system, okay? Their economic system. I'll say it one more time. Their economic system. All right? So what is feudalism? How is this set up? Well, we've talked before about how social classes and social structures are really kind of made up of a hierarchy. And feudalism really kind of expands upon this, and this feudalism takes kind of the shape of a pyramid and really is much, much more structured and really relies heavily on this feudal pyramid, this feudal structure, this hierarchy. Okay, so at the very, 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 very top, we have he who controls the most, he who can have the most power, and that is the king. All right, whoever gets the most land. Okay, feudalism, power is land. Land is power. And that's what really in the Middle Ages is going to be your stronghold here. You got the land, you have the power. All right, so these barbarian kings, whoever gets the most land becomes king. All right, and then who supports him, who backs him, then becomes his lords. Okay, and they're also called then a vassal. All right, a vassal. A vassal is someone who supports the king, and then he would give them the title of a lord. All right, and usually because they supported him and helped him get his throne, he then would give them, for supporting him, land that then they would be in charge of. And so the people that they are over, who live on the land, would then give them support, okay? And then they could collect taxes from them, and they would be in charge of them, so that they would have land that they're in charge of that really belongs to the king, but they're in charge of, kind of like managers and governors, like the bureaucrats had under Rome, but it's more structured that they directly answer to the king, okay? So another thing that the lords have is they're specifically the military support. Okay, so here's that military section here. So if ever this king goes to fight another barbarian king, he's going to call up to the lords and say, hey guys, I need some military support here. Let's go attack, Bob next door. All right. Now, underneath the lords, they have specifically trained warriors that they give and pay to train to do that. So these specifically trained warriors that they pay to support, that they pay to train, and these warriors then help them run the land, okay? And these warriors are called knights, all right? These knights have very specific codes that they're supposed to live by, and they're supposed to answer directly to these lords, all right? Now, these knights are ultimately, their main job here is supposed to keep in line and also protect, okay, the people here at the bottom. And the people here at the bottom are called serfs. Serfs, peasants, they're the low of the low. But, just like in any hierarchy, they make up the bulk of the population. The majority of the population falls here at the bottom, serfs, okay? Now, the serfs are on land that belongs to the king. Okay, they're given this land for free. We say free, right? And they get to farm on this land, protected, because remember, that's a huge part. They're all really scared about what's going on. Protected by the knights, by the lords, and ultimately by the king. Okay, they're all protected by them in exchange for giving money to the lords and then giving money to the king. And that money is in the form of what we recognize from Rome and what we recognize from today, and that's taxes. Now, here's where it kind of gets a little screwy, because the lords can come in at any time and say, hey, I need taxes, pay it now, because the king can come in and say, hey, I need taxes, pay it now. All right? But we'll get into that a little bit further, a little bit later. But this feudal pyramid is that social hierarchy. Okay, serfs at the bottom with the land and the protection, but they pay taxes to the king. Okay, the knights there are supposed to protect the serfs, but they are paid for and supported by the lords. The lords give support, military, and also backing the king, and the king gives them land and money, which they give to the knights. The knights then protect the serfs, ultimately all supporting the king at the top. Okay, so what does this look like besides this pretty little painting here? Well, it really looks like this. Okay, so go ahead and take a minute here before we finish and fill this out on your chart. So the king at the very, very top, remember it's small at the top because there's very few here. And it gets bigger as we go to the bottom because there are more at the bottom. It's that social hierarchy. All right. And then if you take a look at this one, it's the king's job to kind of pass down the protection and what they do. So he handles protection and authority, and then they're appointed to protect. The knights are protecting, and they're appointed to work the land, but then they all are expected to pay taxes, ultimately to the king. Okay? All right, that concludes our notes on the feudal pyramid.